Far from cities and crowded streets, there are places where almost no one is watching. Empty farms, silent forests, long dirt roads that disappear into the wilderness. But sometimes, someone turns on a camera, and what it captures doesn't make sense. Strange animals appearing where they shouldn't be. Massive shapes moving through the darkness. Figures and creatures recorded in places so remote that help is miles away. What you're about to see are some of the most terrifying things ever filmed, in the middle of nowhere. Python restraint. Someone had started recording while a group of men tried to lift a massive python from the ground. It looked like a routine wildlife capture, the kind people film out of curiosity. But the snake kept moving. Its body twisted through their arms like a living rope, heavy and restless, forcing the men to constantly shift their grip. Several hands were holding it at once, yet it still slid and coiled with surprising strength. At one moment, the head rose slightly and the entire group leaned back. The clip ends before they manage to control it. What stays with viewers is how little difference the people seem to make. Cambrian oddity. In layers of ancient Cambrian sediment, paleontologists uncovered a fossil that puzzled them for decades. The creature was small, barely a few centimeters long, yet its body made little sense. Thin, soft legs lined one side, while rigid spines rose sharply from the other. Early researchers couldn't even agree which end was the head. Some drawings showed it walking on the spikes. Others placed the mouth where the tail should be. The anatomy seemed almost random, as if the animal had been assembled incorrectly. Only years later did scientists begin to understand how it actually moved. Even today, hallucigenia still feels strangely unfamiliar. Tully monster. In Carboniferous rock layers, paleontologists began finding the same strange fossil again and again. The body was soft and elongated, almost fish-like, but the details didn't match anything familiar. A long, flexible proboscis extended from the front, ending in a small claw lined with teeth. Above the body ran a rigid bar, with two round eyes fixed at each end. The arrangement looked less like a normal animal and more like something assembled from unrelated parts. Early studies tried to link it to worms, mollusks, or fish, but none of those explanations fit comfortably. Even today, the Tully monster still resists, a clear place in the tree of life. Roadside skull. A few young men were digging beside a rural road somewhere in Africa when their tools struck something hard beneath the soil. At first, it looked like a large rock, but as they cleared more dirt away, the shape began to change. The surface was smooth and curved, with hollow openings that slowly appeared where the soil had packed inside. Someone lifted it slightly, and the camera moved closer. What they were holding looked like a skull. The proportions seemed human, but the size was far larger than anyone expected. The clip ends while they are still examining it, turning it slowly in their hands. River sharks. Someone filming from a building overlooking the Brisbane River noticed dark shapes drifting slowly beneath the surface. At first, they looked like shadows from passing clouds or movement in the water. But the shapes kept returning, gliding in long, deliberate lines, just below the murky surface. As the camera steadied, the outlines became clearer. Broad heads, thick bodies. One passed, close enough to reveal the unmistakable shape of a bull shark. Then another appeared behind it, and another farther downstream. The scene looked calm, almost ordinary, Yet these sharks were swimming through fresh water, directly beneath a busy city. Danube shadow. Two fishermen standing along the Danube shoreline began recording after something large disturbed the water near the bank. At first, it looked like a slow current pushing against the reeds, but the surface kept bulging in the same place. Then a thick body rolled just beneath the waterline, long and dark, moving with steady weight. One of them stepped closer, and the camera tilted down. The shape was massive, far larger than the fish they usually caught there. Some viewers believe it could be a giant catfish. But without measurements, the video leaves only one certainty. Something enormous was moving through that river. Forest figures. A group of explorers moving through dense forest in Indonesia began filming after hearing movement ahead of them. At first, the camera only caught branches shifting and brief flashes of dark shapes between the trees. One figure appeared for a moment near a slope, small and covered in hair, before slipping quickly out of view. The men whispered and followed the direction it moved, but the forest closed around the path again. In local stories, these beings are called mante, said to live deep in remote areas. The footage lasts only seconds, just enough to show something moving where no one expected it. Desert skeleton. Someone on the excavation site began filming quietly while workers brushed sand away from a partially buried skeleton. At first, the bones looked human. The shape of the skull, the curve of the ribs, the long arm resting across the sand. But the proportions quickly raised questions. The limbs appeared far longer than expected, and the size of the skull alone seemed unusually large. People around the pit kept pointing, speaking in low voices, while the camera moved closer to the remains. Soon after, the site was reportedly closed and access restricted. The short clip continued circulating online without any confirmed explanation. Lake surface shape. Someone standing along the shore of a quiet lake began recording after noticing movement breaking the still surface. At first, it looked like a reflection shifting in the water, a long, metallic line sliding just below the surface, but the shape kept moving forward in a steady path, disturbing the water as if something large was gliding underneath. For a moment, the object rose higher, revealing a long section of what looked like a rigid body before sinking again. The clip ends with the water closing back over it. Whatever moved through that lake left no clear explanation. River crocodile. Someone standing along a quiet riverbank began recording after noticing movement in the shadows near the water. At first, the shape blended almost perfectly with the mud and reeds. Then it shifted. A large crocodile slowly pushed forward, its body low and heavy as it slid along the edge of the bank. The head rose slightly, and the wide jaw became visible, thick and powerful, opening just enough to reveal its teeth. Light from the water reflected across the rough skin, giving it the dull shine of wet stone. For a moment, the animal paused completely still, watching the river before continuing forward. Forest giant. A group of visitors walking along a narrow forest trail suddenly stopped when something large began moving between the trees ahead of them. At first, it sounded like branches breaking under heavy weight. Then, the shape appeared. A massive reptile slowly stepped into the open path, its body wide and thick, moving with slow, deliberate motion. People nearby instinctively stepped back, while the camera tried to keep focus on its size. The head moved slightly from side to side as it advanced. Even surrounded by people, the animal looked overwhelmingly large, turning the quiet trail into a place no one wanted to cross. Heaven Lake shape. Someone filming the surface of Heaven Lake noticed a thin disturbance moving slowly across the water. At first, it looked like a line of ripples stretching farther than expected, gliding across the cold surface of the crater lake. Then, a darker shape appeared beneath it, long, curving. The movement was smooth and steady, leaving a faint trail behind it as it advanced through the water. For a moment, the form rose slightly closer to the surface before sinking again into the deep blue. The camera kept following the path, but whatever was moving, there never appeared clearly. Jungle bull. Someone filming deep inside dense jungle vegetation captured movement forcing its way through the undergrowth. At first, the camera only caught branches bending and thick leaves shaking as something pushed forward. Then, the head appeared. A massive animal stepped partially into view, broad across the shoulders, with a heavy body moving slowly through the plants. Its horns curved outward, and each step crushed the vegetation beneath it. The person recording lowered the camera slightly, as if unsure how close the animal might come. The clip ends before the creature fully emerges, leaving only the sound of broken branches, fading into the forest. Desert centipede. Someone standing on a dry plateau began recording after noticing a long shape moving across the ground in the distance. At first, it looked like a fallen branch shifting slowly through the dust, but the movement kept repeating in a steady rhythm. Segment after segment rose and lowered along the body, pushing it forward with an oddly precise motion. As the camera zoomed slightly, the outline became clearer. The body was long, divided into many sections, each one moving almost mechanically as it crossed the barren terrain. The recording ends while it continues moving, leaving only the slow rhythm of its body advancing across the empty landscape. Valley serpent. Someone standing on a distant hillside began recording after noticing a pale shape moving slowly across the valley below. At first, it looked like a long patch of fog drifting along the ground, but the movement stayed close to the terrain, sliding between the slopes in a narrow, winding path. As the camera followed it, the form stretched farther than expected, curving across the valley floor like a single continuous body. Show clip. For a moment, the shape seemed to rise slightly over one ridge, before sinking again behind the hills. The recording ends while it continues, moving through the remote landscape. River giants. Someone filming from above a narrow water channel noticed two massive shapes moving slowly through the surface. At first, they looked like dark currents sliding along the same path. Then, the bodies became clearer. Long, thick forms, pushed forward, side by side, their movement steady and deliberate as they passed through the tight channel. The size alone was striking, each shape stretching across the water like a small boat drifting beneath the surface. For a moment, both forms curved in the same direction, almost as if they were moving together. The recording ends before the camera loses sight of them farther down the channel. Loja Skeleton. In 1965, farmers digging near a rural area in Loja, Ecuador, uncovered bones that immediately drew attention from people nearby. At first, the remains seemed human. The shape of the skull, the length of the limbs, the structure of the rib cage, but the scale appeared unusual. The bones suggested a body far larger than expected, with estimates claiming the skeleton could have measured more than 7 meters in height. News of the discovery spread quickly, and some researchers reportedly traveled to examine the site. Not long after, the remains were said to have disappeared, leaving behind only reports and photographs. Island figure. Someone filming from a helicopter noticed movement near the edge of a remote island clearing. At first, it looked like a tall shadow standing between the trees. But as the aircraft passed closer, the shape became clearer. A large humanoid figure stood briefly in the open, its body unusually tall compared to the surrounding vegetation. For a moment, it seemed to turn toward the sound of the helicopter above. Then it moved. Slow, deliberate steps carried it back toward the tree line before disappearing between the trunks. The clip ends with the helicopter still circling above the quiet forest. Jungle Colossus. Someone nearby began recording, while 2 men struggled to hold down an enormous snake moving across the ground. At first, the camera shook as they tried to keep their grip on the animal's body. The snake twisted with slow, powerful force, sliding through their arms like a living cable. One man pressed down near the head, while the other tried to control the middle of its body. Even with both of them leaning their weight against it, the snake continued pushing forward. As the camera steadies, the full length becomes clearer. The body stretches far beyond the frame, revealing just how large the animal actually is.